And we are live. So, hello everyone and welcome. I'm George Hasiotis, Managing Director at Minusia, and I'm very excited for this session. This is Minusia's first ever roundtable discussion. I'm excited to be joined by search veterans, Jeff Coyle and Stephen Jeske, each with their own exciting search journeys. They found their paths crossing somewhere along the way at the leading content intelligence platform, MarketMuse, or it may be prior to that, I don't know. I would love to hear the story of how you guys met. Jeff is a co-founder and chief strategy officer at MarketMuse, while Stephen is a senior content strategist. Together with Jeff and Stephen, we'll discuss recent changes in Google search based on the announcements that took place at Google's I/O event on May 10th. Jeff, Stephen, we are excited about this, and I want to thank you for accepting our invitation, knowing how busy you are, and welcome you to this discussion.
Hey, thank you for having us, George. I'll jump in first and saying, I always love working with you on your events, and this should be a great discussion. I'm so excited to talk about what's now being called the SGE with Stephen. So I'll let him tell you his take and a little bit about himself, and then I'll follow up. So.
Yeah, George, we got a lot to talk about. Things have dramatically changed since our last conversation, haven't they?
That's right. And I thought that back then we pretty much covered everything there was to search, but apparently Google had a different opinion. Now, before we dive into today's discussion, let me say a bit about how we'll run this session for people who are joining us also to know. I've prepared a unique set of questions for each of you. However, if one of you finds another's question intriguing or has additional thoughts to share, please feel free to jump in with your thoughts, insights, and so on and so forth, right? While we have a certain structure to guide us, of course, we want to run this as to make this conversation to basically leave it unfold as naturally as possible, okay? Now, for all of you tuning in today, we are excited to have you with us. Please don't forget to share where you're joining us from in the chat that you will find in the bottom right of your screen. And also don't hesitate to drop your questions in the comments during the discussion. We'll address them as they come up or during the Q&A session at the end of our conversation. And with that, let's get started with question one. That's for you, Jeff. For people who are unaware of the changes Google announced and have already started rolling out in an experimental mode by Google, can you please give us an overview of what has been announced at Google's I/O event on May 10th?
It's the same as always. Next question. No, I'm just kidding. So what they have done, speaking specifically to the search generative experience, but they've also really announced that, hey, whether you knew it or not, we're part of the large language model market. That's the Google I/O. Some people knew that. Some people had, tested Bard a little bit. But I think what they were really announcing to the world was we're kind of a big deal in this game, and we're about to release lots of things. We're about to do a lot of things that relate to this experience. And some of the elements that are most important to me are, manifesting in the search generative experience. There are also a couple things that you might have missed if you are just a casual observer of the I/O presentation. First of all, it was a beautiful pitch. Anyone who's going to pitch product, it was beautifully crafted. It was, it told a beautiful story. Go back and watch it. That is a master storyteller pitching a masterfully constructed deck. But the one piece of it, I'll start with the end, is I was extremely interested in how they're communicating that they're going to be doing tuning of future language models for specific use cases, because I think that that's critical to understand about Google's history and their future. So one of them, for example, said, we're going to take a large language model and refine it with medical information, refine it with another type of information to produce something in the future that we can then apply to a different product offering. So that's something that's critical, and that's where the puck's going to be going. That's where the ball's going to be going, is how can we take this and refine it for specific instruction sets, and then land on a beautiful, offering for medicine or for manufacturing or for, sports scores, whatever you might say, right? And the reason why I say this, and it's very relevant to the search generative experience, and if for someone who's just coming into this, it means that there's going to be generated text and generated outputs on your search results screen. So how is Google doing that? There's a lot of different ways they can do that. In their initial tests on the SGE, the Search Generative Experience, when you have a query that qualifies as being suitable for this, they can show a box on the screen, and what you're seeing is generated text. So natural language generation, it's predicting text and is writing you a blurb of predicted text of some size. And then what they've also done is they've developed in the ability to show relevant products, to show relevant third-party content sources that you can click on. And then the third piece that's very important about the Search Generative Experience is they're asking you to follow potentially another path of your journey to refine your query or to add on to have another generative experience. So the three pieces there would be a generated amount of text, then you have products and third-party resources, and then you have the ability to take the next step and refine that experience separate from the traditional search experience. So that's going to give you a high level. But from I/O, I think the two big things are generated text and generated experiences will be part of your experience a little bit in the future. And then the refinement of large language models to make them more and more appropriate for particular intents and goals is going to be the future. And I think they did a really great job of setting that 1-2 punch up, and now they're introducing us to it with this first effort. Are there challenges with it? Are there problems with it? Absolutely. That's what we'll be talking about today. But the basics are you can get it, you can click on it, you can see it, and that is a huge step in their direction. So.
Speaking of past and future, second question, that's for you, Stephen. Google has a history of applying changes to search that sort of take away traffic from websites, publishers, brands, and so on. Is what we are talking about today, SGE, one of these cases, or are we looking at something completely different this time?
Are you reading my mind, George? Because as Jeff was talking about this, I was actually going through my mind. I think this is going to be very interesting to see that impact, because historically, definitely over the last couple of years as well, we've seen that be a major concern. As Google is changing from just this page of 10 blue links, offering this much more immersive experience, less and less is there almost a need to go to specific websites to get that information. And I think it's valid. I think it's a valid concern. If you're asking me how to deal with it, that's, we could do a whole other roundtable just on that. I think, though, that what it means is that we're already in a situation where it's no longer enough just to have one page to get to rank, right? You can't just have one page on the subject and expect it to rank. You can't make the best definition on content marketing and expect it to rank because you ran it through an optimizer and it says that yours is the best. It just doesn't work that way anymore. So I think publishers, any website is going to have to think real long and hard about creating content that captures the entire buyer journey, not only because you'll need that to rank well, but once you capture that traffic, you want to be able to pull them in and satisfy that audience's needs with more than just that one piece of content, so that they'll either finish their journey with you or come back at a later time to keep that journey going. I don't think there's any other choice.
That makes sense. Yeah. We have a question by Rolf. I don't know who wants to take that, or maybe we can save it for later. please.
No, I want to add on to what Stephen had stated quickly, succinctly, because he's talking about intents. And the first implementation of search generated experience, the first thing I saw, and I saw this with Bing's implementation, which is much more of a co-pilot versus an intrusive. It's a very, very different interaction. So when you're searching for something, from information retrieval, you're searching in a database, it's delivering something. This is a completely different experience. It's almost an expansion of one's journey. It's a different journey. So Google's got their big task here is to make sure that they're injecting this experience to the right intents. And in some intents, it's not going to be successful. In some, it might be, right? Just like featured snippets. Certain featured snippets aren't a fit. You look at them and they're like, ew, that wasn't the right format. And you're going to have a very similar experience. There's going to be some situations where this type of thing is good and a user instantly connects with it. Just like you're going to see that with featured snippets. There's a lot more secondary questions on that. But I think Google has shown that they are the experts of identifying the right intents that to show A or B. Will they get that right here? I think maybe it's because it's such a different retrieval problem. So I'll just leave it there because I can get into some specifics a little bit later, but I want to make sure we answer the question. Per Rolf's, what was Rolf's question?
So we have a couple of questions and they're they're all very interesting. So let me pull the first by Rolf. Rolf, thank you very much for the question. What are your perspectives on how SGE will affect B2B content marketing? I think that we will, discuss that as we progress, unless I know one of you has something to kind of share right now. And I think that Eric, thank you very much for your question and for finding the time to join us. I know how busy you are and always enjoying our conversations. So Eric is asking, which I think is kind of connected to Rolf's question, how much of the journey do you think Google wants to keep on the SERP vs directed to a website? It seems like certain experiences, for example, booking a hotel, which is not quite B2B. It goes beyond B2B. Obviously, it's B2C as I understand it, as I perceive it, could end up all staying on the SERP, impacting a retailer site revenue. So, I know who would like to go first for Rolf's question, which is what are your perspectives on how SG will affect B2B content marketing? And then I guess we can discuss Eric's question on the journey and how much traffic will stay on Google and how much traffic will be directed on websites. And I think, whether this is also query specific or industry specific or, whoever wants to go. Yeah.
Stephen, I'll take the B2B and then I'll hand you the B2C and I'll do redirect.
Right.
The B2B, the first thing it does, there's two things I would say for Rolf. And also, by the way, awesome questions. Rolf, Eric, let's hang out. Awesome. Great questions. B2B, what it's going to do is expose how well Google truly understands the B2B buyer journey very quickly. And I'll explain that in a couple ways. One, there's going to be a tremendous impact on early stage awareness content. If it isn't truly understanding how to drive someone down that B2B journey. So if you have a basic early stage awareness page that isn't connecting with the B2B buyer journey, and you have that on your site, and your site isn't telling the story that that entire journey, right? Well, this search generated experience might answer that question succinctly and freeze the journey. So it might not get to your second step. That first part of that journey, there may not be an easy way for them to get to your page as they once did, right? So the question then becomes, is Google going to recognize that they do need to escort somebody from the beginning to the middle of that journey? If they do that well, they may bypass your site. So in a nutshell, if you're in B2B content marketing, it may be the case that you have to have early stage awareness content and you have to have beautiful definitions, right? But they may never get all that much traffic anymore, but you need to have them So your what is X, right? Coming from the guy that used to manage whatis.com, right? So in B2B, your what is X page, you may need it to tell the story that you have that expertise, but it may become less of an entry. But what it does, it exposes Google. It exposes Google in their middle of the funnel. Because if they don't point you to the right next step, they're not going to be a useful product anymore. So if they're going to displace you, they've got to bring you to part two. Sorry, George. What was that?
Sorry for interrupting. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but as you were saying that, my mind went to a concept called topical authority. And I guess my question is what you're describing right now connected to that? Meaning that, yes, you may lose or you may expect to get less traffic for some of these informational queries, such as what is, I don't know, what is a live streaming platform, right? For Perry, who is tuning in from Uscreen. So you may get less traffic from a query like that, but you need to have that nevertheless as a page on your website, because this is, your way of telling Google that, I can speak for topics way beyond like top of the funnel, let's say, because, this is what I'm all about and so on and so forth. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. It's on the nose. It's telling you have to have that infrastructure, the foundation of the house. It is, bi-directional. You can't just have the bottom of the funnel. You can't just be a transaction, right? Yeah. Or else that's not telling the story. So if you can't just be the transaction on your $50,000 software product, right? Then you have to have that entire infrastructure on that concept. You have to tell the story that all the stages of the funnel. So the challenge that Google has is if they displace one of these areas with their own stuff, they really need to know the rest of it, because they become the traffic cop. They become that buyer journey manager with this solution. And if they do it badly, it won't be very useful. And so they're taking a huge, huge risk in placing themselves inside the buyer journey for a complex B2B topic, or for a B2B learning or purchase journey. And there's so many different examples, but that's how it's going to play out. Is it seems easier to displace the easy answer featured snippets, right? But what's actually going to manifest is it's extremely difficult, because the B2B purchase journey, if you've ever seen the Gartner traffic map, it is not simple. And you may land on that basic what is and immediately want to enter a second part. You may land in the middle and you want to go to the early or late. There's a lot of different considerations, and Google can't solve them all. And it's going to be very, very obvious how well they understand the B2B buyer journey. And then what can you do to defend against it? Cover everything. Think about your twists on industries. So if you have an early stage CRM page, CRM for industry. If you know more about this, if you know all the problems that happen early stage in the software selection process, right? So try to block somebody from taking the wrong second step with your first step article. So there's a lot of ways you can defend based on the way that Google implements this. And so it's just the beginning of being really, really creative. So Rolf, net, you got to be very creative and watch what they do. Watch how they try to displace you. And if they displace you in a tone-deaf way, it's going to be a great opportunity for B2B marketers. It's going to be a huge opportunity for really smart ones. So I'll hand off to Stephen on you could probably add to that and then add.
Yeah, really, Jeff, what you're talking about is that, and maybe you don't realize it, but I think most content strategists and SEOs are going to have to make this radical mind shift. I mean, Jeff has already did it, so maybe he kind of glossed over this. But I mean, it takes a lot to actually say, okay, I got to create content that I'm probably not going to be getting any traffic from. And so, most people, when they're creating content, their justification is either, well, it's going to get me lots of traffic for a top of the funnel play, or conversions for bottom of the funnel. And that's the extent of it. But to actually, I mean, how are you going to it's hard right now. How are you going to justify, well, I have to create this content. I have to, because if I don't, all my other content won't perform because I'm not coming across as an expert, because that's essentially what Jeff is saying. You really have to show that expertise. And that expertise isn't just by creating bottom of the funnel content.
You're so right, Stephen. And I think it's going to be a very big challenge, because you can't just say because some guy named George said so, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's real hard when the demand gen team maybe isn't attributing value to your content anyway. Right. Now it's not even generating traffic. I mean, imagine the person in charge of leads is like, we don't need that early stage awareness stuff. It doesn't generate leads. My awesome pricing content does, because they really don't understand the buyer journey. Now you got to say, oh yeah, it's not going to, you just believe me. It's going to, Google needs this to tell the story that we have expertise. And, the same way that topic authority, at Google, which was just announced as being real, even though it's been around for a very, very long time. And we're all very happy about that at MarketMuse, is, if you haven't written about this topic, it's very highly, or any semantically related concepts, it's very highly unlikely that you are the expert on this topic. And we also need to be thinking about this at the page, at the site section, and the site level. Are people going to get religion overnight that the entire website matters, that all their site sections matter, that you have to build this beautiful foundation and they can't just get free money from SERPs anymore? I mean, it's going to be harder than I make it sound. Stephen, well put.
Can I go back to B2B for a minute, because this is also connected to a question I had, and I guess we can talk about more about how things will change for specific types of queries moving forward. But if we think about SaaS companies, some of the most commercially important keywords are keywords that indicate investigation, such as best content optimization platforms or MarketMuse reviews. And then we also have keywords that indicate commercial investigation, but they may also indicate that the searcher has reached a switching moment. And these keywords may be MarketMuse alternative or MarketMuse vs competitor, right? My question is, how do you see search results change for these keywords? And I think that this is connected to what, to Rolf's, question, and also connected to, I guess it's interesting to many of the people who are joining us today, some of whom I really know they are in SaaS and they want to hear about these types of queries. So who would like to answer this?
Stephen, I'll let you go on this one, and then I'll layer on if it's relevant. So
yeah, I think we got our work cut out for us. I really do. And again, it's and in a way, there's just this. I think there's still this common theme that's running throughout this conversation, and in fact, it really doesn't matter whether you're B2B, B2C, SaaS or not. If you don't have the content on your site that shows that you're an expert in whatever it is that you're doing, it's going to be tough to rank for anything. It doesn't matter what you're targeting. And so when you're looking at these things, I think you do have to, and kind of coming back to what Jeff was saying, you really do have to look at this as part of a whole. I don't think you can do those plays anymore. I'm just thinking of small sites, or even somebody thinking of launching a new site. I don't think you can do a play like, I'm just going to start doing bottom of funnel traffic. Right. Or I think I'm just going to go for top of funnel and I'm just going to build out from there. I don't think that can work. I think that realistically now, especially if you're starting from absolute scratch and you have no authority whatsoever, good luck. I think that's gonna, and I hate to say it, but I think we're getting to the point where you're gonna need a substantial amount of content just to be in the game. And so that really puts you at a disadvantage. And if you do already have a site, I think we really have to seriously look hard at where your authority already exists and build out from that, no matter where it may be, right? Assuming, of course, that's related, and this is the other point, assuming it's related to really what you want to be known for. Because I've come across and I've talked to many people on websites where when we look at it, it actually turns out that they're not authoritative in what they want to be known to be about. But assuming that you are, that's where you're going to have to start and build out. And it's kind of irrelevant what industry you're in. And it's kind of irrelevant what you want to target. You're going to have to kind of pay your dues.
Well, I would add something. Oh, I'm sorry.
So basically, as I perceive it, the type of query may not be as important after all, meaning that they may, the type of query may not trigger an SGE today, but moving forward, maybe their understanding and their way of answering things is better and better, right? And more refined and so on and so forth. And they feel more confident about answering more types of queries. And so it doesn't really matter as long as you cover the whole spectrum of the buyer journey, regardless if it's B2B or B2C, you are good and you will be able to capture some of that, let's say, demand. But I think a very important question here is, okay, I get that, but what is, of course, we are entering kind of a, everything we will share now is kind of an assumption, right? But what is the best case and what is the worst case scenario we're looking into here? I mean, is it going to be that websites are just going to be destroyed? Or is it that, we're looking at a small decrease, let's say of, 10% or whatever, which may be big depending on the total amount of traffic that you get on a monthly basis?
I would take it the other, I'd say it's the reverse of the outcome. So, and by the way, this is assumption of what they're going to do with search generative experience, but we do have experience with Google rolling out similar solutions. So we can be a little bit predictive or prescriptive of where we would see this puck going. What I would actually see here is search generative experience will contract and be shown in fewer intents until it is nailed down that it is providing value. And then my take on prescribing how to appeal to this or perform, certainly you want to have the infrastructure that tells the story, but you might also be looking at gaps that it presents, much like you would featured snippet research. If it's not producing a lot of value, just like you look at search results pages, I don't think it's appealing to the intent that I feel people have. I don't think it's the content on this solution, on this particular query is good. What do? I produce amazing content on that. Well, we might see search generative experiences that are tone deaf, right? Because it's generated and it's not producing the right next step. I mean, and I think his answer is Eric's question really well for the journey, keeping people on the SERP, driving to a website. For example, booking a hotel could end up staying on the search result, impacting retailer site revenue. I think it depends on and I'm not saying depends like an SEO would. I'm saying it depends on the intent of the user. If the user's in a final stage price comparison, I think potentially. However, most people's buyer journeys are far more complex, whether it's socks, a hotel, or a $2,000 e-bike. I laughed hysterically at the search generative experience for a $2,000 e-bike, for that you would consider buying that without looking at one review or without researching one page is hilarious. It's hilariously illustrating lack of understanding of the buyer journey. If you had already made the decision and this provided you a cheaper price, that's a different stage of the e-commerce buy cycle. What that tells you as a retailer is you need to have that beautiful experience of that true, honest experience of how somebody had the riding experience, that you have that beautiful review by somebody who actually owned the product or used the product, right? If Google doesn't point people to that, that's bad on them. That's what their search results were supposed to do. They're supposed to appeal to the buyer journey stage you're in. So SGE is not going to appeal to all those buying journey stages properly. And you as a marketer need to capitalize on that. How do you capitalize it? on it, you provide that meaningful experience that the user actually wants, even if Google for a short period of time doesn't provide it. If Google displaces a real human experience with their text, then they're in trouble. They're in trouble as a business, right? But to displace that real human experience authentically is going to be extremely difficult, and it's not something I expect. If you think you're going to buy anything of any cost based on the potential assertion of this small piece of text, it's just not the reality of the real buyer journey. People might click on something they already expected to buy. They might go into that experience, but immediate transaction, they would have already made the purchase decision for that particular product. And that's where I think that impacting retailer site revenue, absolutely. But that's all workflow, logistics, attribution, et cetera. They're going to hurt you because of the way they implement it, not because they're displacing the buyer journey in the short run. And that'd be my assumption there. So,
I would like to we have more questions, and we would like to we will try to answer them all. But I would like to continue with my questions because I think that I want this to be as practical as possible. And so I'm going back to you, Stephen. And I know that at MarketMuse you help customers with their content strategy. So let's pretend I'm a customer, right? And I come to you and say, Stephen, we need to change our content strategy because these changes in Google search scare me off. And not only that, we need to do it ASAP. What would you recommend me to do as my trusted advisor in terms of content strategy? I guess my question is, should people who have a playbook or a strategy defined for 2023 consider any changes based on Google's announcements, or you should just stick to what you were doing before, assuming that what you were doing before was, X and Y and Z?
Oh, that would depend on your strategy that you were sharing with me. Because, and I hate to say this, but there's a lot of bad strategies out there still. There's a lot of strategies out there that are based on stuff that was happening, before I started with MarketMuse over 5 years ago. And things have changed drastically, and, strategies haven't necessarily kept up with those times. And, to give you an example, what I still see, fortunately not from people none of our customers that I deal with, I should clarify this, but a popular strategy is still popular to this day is, all right, I optimize my piece of content. It's gone as far as I'm going to get in the rankings. I'll go and hire a link or get my link builder to build out some links to that. And, the links may, or if they're good quality, they might do something for a little while. But the problem, of course, is that, getting links is kind of like buying ads. Those links have to keep on building up for them to actually have influence. And that influence only goes so far, whereas in my opinion, you're better off building out content, because not only will your audience benefit from that content, you'll benefit from it too, because Google will recognize that content. And again, they'll recognize that as part of your authority. I mean, it used to be, let's say 10, 15, 20 years ago, that authority was measured in links, right? That was the defining characteristic. If you were getting links, that meant you were authority, but that's just not the way it's working anymore. Yet, I think a lot of people still believe that's what it comes down to, that my content's fine, I just need more links. And so if that's the type of strategy that you're talking about, and should you keep on doing it? Definitely not, because it's just going to get, the events in the past month or so are just going to bear that out, that it's just getting worse and worse to try to pursue that type of strategy, or try to pursue a strategy where it's not holistic, in that you're just looking at individual pages. I'm just optimizing this individual page, I'm optimizing that individual page, and that's it. I think those are destined for failure. You're going to have some success, right? Everybody gets lucky, and you will get lucky too, but that's not a strategy.
So essentially, we can't be selective with the type of content and like the types of keywords we go after. We also can't kind of depend on links to solve our content problems, content quality problems, or lack of like a cohesive content strategy problems, and so on and so forth. And if that's what you were doing before, like this whole thing was announced, then this wasn't a good strategy to begin with, right? Yeah. So you had to change it either way. But as I understand it, it's becoming even more important to change it now and shift the focus of like what you were doing to becoming present at every stage of the buyer journey, regardless of whether this triggers an SG or not, and whether this brings you like a lot of traffic or not. I want to kind of tweak the question now. I'm the same customer, and I come to you, Jeff, this time and say, what do we need to do with our existing content inventory though? Do we need to change, update everything, or like be selective about the changes we apply, or are we good? And I'm asking these questions because these are questions that our clients also ask us, right? When it comes to content strategy for net new content, or when it comes to the existing content inventory, do we have to go back and change some things based on these announcements by Google? Jeff, the stage is yours.
No, that's sure, for sure. And so I think that what you really want to make sure is to know that there isn't a simple answer for your website. All of the content on your site is, make sure that the mirror is crystal clear and you don't expect something unorthodox to yield some sort of big, huge win at this point. You might be able to identify that in a content inventory process. You might be able to identify some quick wins. You might be able to identify some gaps in your game, but it's all going to be deriving from what Stephen just said. You historically had low efficiency, low effectiveness with your content. You built out content that was ineffective, whether it was low quality or it wasn't accessible. There's going to be something you find that's going to yield this challenge. If you believe that there's going to be a simple output that you can come in with and say, this is likely going to be where we land. One of the most famous ones that you hear is deleting content and doing a heavy pruning effort. The percentage of times that will yield a success without doing an actual research process is so extraordinarily low. It's almost hilarious the amount of times that I think people I hear, I deleted all this content, traffic went up. Most of the time, that's not all they did. And to be able to predict that, one must look at the entire site. Most of the time in those situations, you're actually hurting yourself if you do that, if you go in with that conclusion. So updating existing content, absolutely. If you have an advantage on a topic or you're ranking with a page and that page doesn't satisfy the user intent for people going to that page, you need to make it satisfy that intent and be an awesome page. And if that page, for one reason or another, can't be updated, go write one that does and connect it, right? So that playbook is your instant win playbook, right? Because you have a page that's ranking well for something, and then your page isn't following through. It's not giving the user everything they dreamed they were going to get. Make it do that, but sometimes you can't. Let's say it's doing that for some other queries. So you got to write a page that does and provide that value, because it's the value you're promising and not delivering today. So if you're promising value and not delivering it today, you got to solve that problem first. If you've got pockets of pages that are consistently not delivering on the promise, you're in trouble. And that process completely should be put ahead of any other process right now, because it's going to catch up with you far more than any other situation. And I think that that's something from a update perspective. You're not just updating pages to make them optimize. You're not copying your competitors like a lot of software solutions would like you to do, right? Is you really, really need to make sure that if it's performing for a term or you're targeting a term, you are providing and following through and giving the best experience. because as Google starts to invade us on these search results more, if your thin content page is providing less value than their search generative experience, that's going to be a great signal. And that's something you got to be in trouble. You're going to be in trouble with.
That makes sense. And allow me to kind of present a scenario here, which is also connected to Dylan's question. Dylan, thank you very much for your question. Let's assume that you have a set of pages that like talk about reviews, right? MarketMuse reviews, for example, okay? Because you are an affiliate website, okay? Would it make sense in that context, the update to be that, you know what? I am not going to do a review without actually using the tool. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to all these reviews and get access to these tools, use them for, I don't know, like a logical time frame for me to get some sort of experience with first-hand experience with this tool, and rewrite the piece in a completely different way. Or if we are talking about an alternatives page, which is also an important, let's say, keyword type for SaaS companies particularly, I'm going to go back to all these list posts with 22 alternatives, and I'm going to, have 4 alternatives, but I'm going to actually use them, right? Mm-hmm. Is this logic in the right direction? Would you say that these kinds of updates make sense and would help in that direction?
Hugely, in my opinion. I think that's at one point it was valid to actually kind of do like a curation page, essentially, and curate all the different reviews that you found on the web and kind of mash them all together. And that was justified because back then there wasn't a lot of information. That doesn't work anymore, right? To just essentially do a review without having experience, now it's cheating. It's like lying. That's not a review. How could you tell me that something is great when you haven't even used it? And I don't care if you've only used it for, let's say I spent 8 hours comparing, this electric lawnmower against this battery-powered one. I cut my lawn 5 times last week. And here's what I found out. That's way better than just grabbing stuff and recycling it and quote, repurposing, as some people might want to call it.
Well, I mean, but there's a lot. I have a lot I could say about this, but I'm being sensitive to time. What you say will need to be authenticatable, mm-hmm. right? So you got to come across as authentic, but it needs to be authenticatable. In software selection, especially mid-market to small enterprise or enterprise, it's not viable that you would have installed all these products.
That's true.
Okay. You will not, the person writing that query, because you know what they call those people who have installed and used all those products? Forrester and Gartner. Pretty much the only two that would have the bandwidth or the ability to. Yeah. And in the hardware market, hardware market, test unit distribution. And by the way, I used to run software review, notebook review, tablet PC review, a bunch of sites in consumer electronics as well. The test distribution market is so difficult. You have to invest so much. So the question will be to Dylan, and I know Dylan quite well, is to say, if you're not willing to say that you actually didn't review it, how are you providing additional value? That becomes the challenge of an affiliate. If you are, not that anyone would, but let's just say you have a cigarette reviews site and you've never smoked a cigarette, right? You're kind of inauthentic, right? So if you said, I never smoked, but I saw that this is menthol and it smells like this and this. I don't smoke, by the way, so I would be talking out of my ear. But let's just say let's say you're doing a review of a product you can't get for one reason or another. Let's say you're reviewing types of exotic products. Let's say you're reviewing medicinal products. right? If you're reviewing homeopathic remedies, do you actually have to do all of those juice cleanses yourself? How can one then become an authority? You don't actually need the experience, but you do need to explain why you should be a reputable source to provide said experience. Much like if you are, and I heard this is a great example. I'm stealing it from somebody without attribution, and I forget who it was, and I'll go back and think about it. This is a great example. If you are an expert on software selection for payroll software, you may never have run payroll with a software product. The person who is the HR administrator who runs payroll with the thing, they're an expert on something else that provides value. Their butt's in the seat. So the challenge that Google has, and we all have, is to figure out butt in seat who runs payroll versus the expert who could work at Forrester and review payroll process versus none of the above. You've got to be able to explain why it's you who deserves the attribution of value. And you got to explain that through your content. And it's hard and it's going to be tough. But if you are reviewing, a particular thing where passionate people buy it, they can spot a fake instantly. Me and Jared Krause, who you may know from his book, we kind of set this up. I was saying things about surfing that would obviously show that I'm not a surfer. And at the end, he was like, "That was so funny, Jeff. I could tell you were just trying to say stuff." And I was trying to prove a point there that if he's like an awesome surfer, he knows that, he's like, yeah, no one uses the word skeg anymore, it's like that. If you're doing a review of baseball cards or, high price bourbon, right? They're going to spot a fake when they read it. So now the question is, do you try to get away with it with your content? Or are you honest and clear about what you're actually doing and the value you're providing? That's the hardest thing everybody's going to have to deal with over the next year is, do they get into the details of why they think they're providing value, or do they lie? And that's going to be hard.
In the context of spotting a fake, what are your thoughts on AI content then? Because as far as I'm concerned, in 2023, AI content is not a thing. Like, it can't have experience with a software solution or yet, right? Or with like something like a trip to Germany or like whatever. So should we trust AI content with some, like, for some keyword types? Should we not trust it at all? What is your stance? And as an extension, I guess MarketMuse's stance when it comes to AI content, and what should people pay attention to when it comes to all this craziness right now around it?
I'll let Steven take first crack.
Okay, well, we don't have much time, so I'll make this brief. You got to be very careful. My opinion really hasn't changed since ages ago. You have to be so careful when you're using this. You cannot expect, and especially, this kind of relates to another thing too, you cannot expect these large language models to get you out of a jam so that you just generate lots of content thinking that, okay, now we've got to generate lots of content. We'll use an LLM, because it'll be cheap, easy to do. And, you look at it and it's passable. Yeah, at first glance, this stuff looks fine. It's only when you actually start looking at it in detail, and if you actually are an expert in the stuff that you've got in the large language model to generate stuff around, then you find out the weaknesses. So you can't use it as is verbatim. You can't use that as is verbatim either, because then suddenly you're going to need somebody you need somebody to edit anyways. But now not only do you need an editor, you need somebody that is also a subject matter expert. So it's hard enough to find good editors. It's almost impossible, in my opinion, to find a subject matter expert that is also a great editor. Like, that's just asking for too much. So you can't go at it that way. You just can't. So the other alternative is to really to think of using this literally just as a tool. Just like if you had a hammer, you'd be using it to hammer nails. But you wouldn't use a hammer to try to put a screw into a piece of wood. That wouldn't work very well. You're going to see a lot of that, and I do see a lot of that happening right now, where because everyone has this new hammer called ChatGPT, and they're hitting everything with it, right? Doesn't work, but you can use it quite effectively to do some simple things. I shouldn't really call them simple, but you can use them to give you ideas for outlines that you might want to use as a framework. Of course, you're going to be wanting to tweak those things, or to expand certain thoughts, or just have an interaction. I look at it as being like a writer's personal assistant. You can interact, have, for better, or conversation isn't maybe the best word, but for lack of a better word right now, you can converse with it, right? And kind of delve in and understand some more, maybe different viewpoints, because, there's always something there that you can gain from an interaction with one of these models that you wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I would say there is a misconception of that AI equals the large language model I have access to, right? No, sorry. AI isn't this. This is one of billions of possible applications and thousands of market available software. So if you're doing complex math equations, there's an AI that will support that. It's not the thing you have access to for $20 a month. And I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm just saying, don't think it's going to solve all of those problems. You've got to know what your problems are that you want to solve before you're truly going to have an impact with AI. So if the quick story I tell here is, one of the first implementations of natural language generation was at Washington Post, and they couldn't cover all the Olympic games. And they said, let's use AI to try to at least cover a meets minimum of all the games, so everybody gets their medals reported on. I love that use case because they solved it. And then their writers got to focus on their special interest and features instead of doing mundane process. You got to do that for yourself. Figure out what you're doing manually. Figure out what your team's doing manually or inefficiently. Are they picking out of every 10 articles they write, are only one of them successful? First of all, they need MarketMuse. Second of all, they can improve that hit rate dramatically. The way you improve a baseball player who hits one hit out of 10 at-bats isn't by giving them 40 at-bats, because they're only going to get 4 hits, right? So if you think that they're going to use, you like that new analogy, Stephen, if you think that using AI is going to quadruple this articles you're writing, and that's going to solve your problems, oh my goodness. You would not do that with any other aspect of your business, right? So I'm hearing about people, thank you, Eric. I'm hearing about people who are taking a 90-person team and trimming it down to 10. They must not have been doing good work. If you can solve that problem, you got to solve other problems. Stephen, I know since we've been using this stuff for years, we've had access to and have used large language models in our day-to-day for more than 2 years. Okay, I can do 10 times the work that I used to be able to do. Jeff, as an individual who does lots of things, but I can, on certain use cases, I'm 10 to 1. You've got to figure that out for yourself, because I can deliver a product that I used myself, manual labor, that used to be 40 hours in 4. And the quality is impeccable and something that I couldn't possibly do. Now, George, here's the question though, right? I wouldn't have done it before. That's the key. What AI is giving you is the ability to do stuff you probably wouldn't have done before. You wouldn't have gone and hired a 40-hour person and trained them to do all that stuff. What you've got to find out is, what is the stuff you weren't going to do, but getting done adds value? And you've got to do a process inventory. But the answer to your question, if that content isn't authentic and it's not telling the story of expertise, the penalty for that, you might as well just consider it, so extreme. You would never do that for your brand. If you're a real brand, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something very important though? Because I really believe people, and by the way, I see that people, stick with us. They obviously they find it very, very interesting. And thank you for that. I think this is a very important distinction to be made though, because I don't want people to be confused when it comes to all the software solutions that are out there. As I see it, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are tools in the, let's say, category, broadly defined category as content optimization or content intelligence. I don't know how you refer to it specifically. Tools like MarketMuse. And there are AI content tools, or as I perceive it, distributors of OpenAI's IP. Do you think there is a future for content optimization tools and AI content distributors? Or in the future, it will only be tools that generate AI content and no tools that actually help content creators create content? In other words, how do you see these changes shape your category, I guess, and whether you can make a distinction so that it's clear to people that, this is what we mean when we say content optimization or content intelligence, and this is what we mean when we say AI content generation.
And Steven's a writer. And he knows, and so he's going to answer this question from the standpoint of somebody who writes extremely well. I don't write extremely well. When I use this type of technology, it gives me a little bit, but I've done so much work beforehand. The draft, I'm able to inject my own story spines and my sequencing and my personal takes and all that stuff, weave it together and make sure that it computes more effectively than sitting down on a pen and paper. So each task needs to be analyzed to see, does it help you and does it help the quality of the output? But I'll let Steven answer, because he's written 1,000 times more content than I ever will in my entire life.
Well, kind of just to elaborate on that, I think people still need to understand that there's a big difference in using AI to help you determine what you should write about and using AI to write about that subject. Because if you get it wrong and you don't really know what to write about, again, coming back what Jeff said, it doesn't help you to use AI to write a lot of that content. You could write, 100 different things, right? Using ChatGPT or any other LLM. And if it's the wrong stuff, you're writing about the wrong things, you won't be ahead. In fact, you'll actually be behind the 8 ball there, because you will end up getting essentially penalized, right? If you think about Google's helpful content update, if you're just putting out crap and that's not helpful, all that content will drag down everything on your site. And chances are you're not even going to realize it.
Yeah, and for the record, there was a blog post by Google's CEO, Sundar Pichai, who mentioned the importance of AI responsibility, and in that context mentioned watermarking and metadata as ways of detecting text-based and visual content. And so I see a future way where AI content gets depreciated by Google, maybe because it also has the watermark of a competitor. I don't know. And especially considering the fact that they insist, and it was a common theme, during this presentation, on content that demonstrates experience, expertise, and so on and so forth. Now, last question I have for you. I don't know who wants to take this, but I think both of you may, each of you may have, a different way of perceiving this this future for MarketMuse. And so my question is, how is MarketMuse preparing for and adapting to the changes on the product level?
I'll give you one part. Steven can give you the other, but I think we're both thinking about this. I think about ways people are doing this badly, because if people are doing it badly a lot more, it actually makes for a lot more opportunities for our clients. And that's the way that's one way of thinking about the market. What I would love to be able to do, and Steve and I, your color, is to escort as many people as I can in the world to be able to be as good as Steven is, just bluntly, at making decisions about content, writing content with the assistance of software. And I think he can then answer, getting how quickly they can get adopted, how quickly they can integrate these processes. But I don't know if you have something to say on the last word.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, you kind of summed it up. I think there still is a huge opportunity there. I know that I would say right now, 95% of our industry is still just focused on, typing. Let me write stuff. Let me help people write stuff. And while it's valid, I think there's just this, if anything, what's going on with these changes coming with Google are going to even have greater impact and have greater emphasis on the need to be strategic in your content decisions. You have no choice.
I agree. And I think, Zeph, final word?
And I'll just say, if software cuts corners or tricks Google, it has a short shelf life. And I'm watching software come out, and all it's doing is giving you the ability to write more low quality content or copy your competitors. And just because it says it's AI doesn't mean it's AI. It means it might have access to an API. And you got to really, really pick your tools well. Because just because they have access to an API doesn't mean that they have your best interests in mind. They just, got access to this API before some other people did. And that's really critical.
That's a great way to wrap things up. Jeff, Steven, thank you both very much. Thank you to everyone who joined us for this first roundtable discussion. I'm really sorry that we didn't have the time to go through all the questions we got. Thank you for the questions. I guess the engagement we had on this first roundtable showed me that we may have to repeat that at some point.
Yeah.
Jeff, Steven, thank you very much, and thank you very much to everyone who tuned in and stayed with us until the end. Until next time, bye.